Hello, everyone. This is session 3 of an 8-session workshop in Chennai Storytelling Festival 2024. Title of the workshop is Story Composition, also known as Making Up Stories. And this is session 3 dedicated to dramatic structure. But we will touch upon material from tomorrow also. Tomorrow is characterization. The first 2 sessions last week were about where do stories come from, and the recordings of those 2 are on the flyer. The flyer is clickable, and I'm pasting the flyer into the chat section right now. So if you would like to catch up, if you were not here last weekend, you can see the recordings from last weekend. The 2 primary areas where I posited or I explored where stories come from, and there it is, there's the webpage, were from our experience, which we can play with, we can fictionalize, and also the unconscious, one's unconscious. And I led us through 2 activities, which gives a chance to explore the unconscious, active imagination, and the question-based storytelling method. So today is dramatic structure. And I really want to say that a real artist does not create according to formula. The formulas that we'll look at today are interesting. They have been developed especially by scholars after the fact. You know, they said, this is the way I've seen it in a great story. This is the way it should be done. Poppycock. It's not the way it should be done. The way it should be done is the story needs to come out of your soul and take whatever shape it needs to shape. But, you know, we have different parts of our brain and different hats we wear. The part that we'll think about dramatic structure is the more intellectual, perhaps academic side, but not to be confused with the creative side. So I'm presenting to you a lot of what I'm presenting to you today is from the thinking of what is called in Hollywood screenplay gurus. They've appropriated that word guru from India, and they talk about screenplay gurus. The first one, as far as I know, really was Joseph Campbell, because his book in 1954, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, really made a big impression on writers, on cinema makers. George Lucas, who I guess he produced, I guess he directed the Star Wars movies, he was a good friend with Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell's work is totally inside the Star Wars movies. And ever since then, various other people have modified and applied Joseph Campbell's thinking about the hero going on a mission, and most of all, the hero wanting something. A basic idea in the corpus of literature and thinking about story, especially for cinema, is that a story has to be based on an individual who wants something. That's called the movie plot, the movie goal, the plot goal. And so the story then, the movie is what happens along the way. Does the character get it, not get it, get something else? Does it come out to a compromise? So that's one big line of thinking. Okay, and there's been a lot of talk about the well-made play or the well-made novel, a lot of talk about the 3-act structure. I'll launch into this. But really what I want to say first is that something that more relates to tomorrow, perhaps, what's emerged to me in what other people are thinking and what I'm thinking is that a story is especially about the psychological development of the main characters, the transformations they go through. You know, there's such a thing as rising to the occasion, learning, transforming, getting a new vision of oneself and one's life and the world. And you know, there's the expression, I didn't think I had it in me. I didn't think she had it in her. I didn't think he had it in her. He had it in him. I didn't think they had it in them. But one model of story is that they rise to the occasion and they are able to grow and triumph in whatever way is called for. So it's a psychological journey, and especially Joseph Campbell, you know, the hero's journey. It's not about somebody going on a physical journey and going into a cave and fighting a dragon. It's very clearly he wrote it as a psychological path for the individual. So what's interesting to me is these people who theorize on all this, they're talking about structure of movies or of stories and of characters, but it really applies to us. It applies to the individual. It's a sort of a self-help model that has developed, which we can say it's just for characters in stories and in movies, but really it's about the development of each of us. That you know, the feeling sometimes when you leave a movie and you go out into the sunshine and you feel just exuberant, you feel energized. It may be because you've just seen a movie where a character developed, rose to the occasion, really fulfilled herself, learned something, grew, and becoming oneself, fulfilling oneself, finding oneself, that is very inspirational, and it gives us hope for ourselves. So I remember, you know, 50 years ago coming out of a theater and feeling that exuberance. Here I am, world, I'm ready to go. And now I'm realizing I might have seen a movie that was consciously or not involved a character going through this transformation. So shall we launch into the three act story structure? Yes. It's a very popular idea that a story has to begin with a hook. A hook is something, also the hook is used in terms of music, right? In music, a hook is such a beautiful melody or rhythm, you can't stop. It's so beautiful. In story, a hook is an opening event that grabs your attention, and if it was a book, you can't put the book down. It's a page turner. So the hook lets us all know what's at stake. You know, at the beginning of a story, you have to communicate to your listeners, well, why should you even listen? You know, how or why is this relevant or important? So a hook makes it very clear on an emotional level what's at stake for the characters. And of course, we all identify with the characters. We project ourselves onto the characters, into their situations. So there needs to be, according to this line of thinking, a hook event which may be shocking, which shakes up the character, and then the character is going to begin the journey that the character needs to go on to transform themselves and maybe to transform the world. So there may be a shock. There may be questions that come up because of the hook. You know, why did this happen? What's the meaning of this? Sometimes it involves a lot of action at the beginning. That's one style of hook. There's a Latin term for it, which means in the middle of the action. One of the stories that we're especially looking at in this workshop is The Tempest by William Shakespeare. And that play begins with a tempest and a ship is being shipwrecked, and the sailors on the ship and the politicians on the ship are saying, all hell is empty. All the demons have come on this ship, and they're destroying us, and they all jump overboard. So it's a big hubbub and a big excitement, and if you're watching it, you're wondering what is going on here. Why is this happening? Who is it happening to? What's the meaning of this? Why is William Shakespeare showing us this storm and this ship and these the demons? At least that's the perception of the sailors, and fire all over the ship, and so they all jump overboard. Well, it turns out that it's all caused by a man named Prospero, who has caused the tempest. He knows magic, and he has caused the tempest. He has caused the shipwreck to shipwreck the people who overthrew him many years ago and put him in a small boat with his daughter in the middle of the ocean, hoping they would die. But they didn't die. They ended up on an island. And then for years and years, Prospero kept studying his magic books until the moment came when he could cause a tempest, and his enemies were on a ship going from one place to another, going to a marriage, and he caused a tempest with his fury and with his knowledge of nature and magic somehow, that he was able to project his fury and energy onto the atmosphere and cause this shipwreck. Well, you don't find out about all this at the beginning. All you know is there's a terrible storm going and the people are jumping off the ship. So that's one type of hook. Anyone, I'm going to invite you all to come with your stories a week from tonight. Both stories that you love from books or movies, stories that you tell, stories from your own life. A week from tonight is your story night. You know, these sessions are only an hour, so we'll do what we can. But a week from tonight especially, come with your favorite stories or stories that you've made up, and see if any of the ideas that I will have presented in the first 4 sessions relate. But let me start it now. Anybody, do you recall a hook at the beginning of a movie, or at the beginning of a book, at the beginning of a story that you heard in storytelling? Does anything come to mind? A hook. A hook can also be known as the inciting incident. According to some theorists, the inciting incident comes after the hook, but it can be the hook also. The inciting incident is where things change. You know, things were going along, but then suddenly something happens and it really sets the story in motion. So does it come to mind a hook or an inciting incident at the beginning of any type of story? Priyanka.
Yes, being a Bollywood movie buff, most of the retro movies started with a sudden, thunderstorm and lightning, and there comes a snake inside the house and beat the father, a hero's father, and hero is like a super small boy, like 4 or 5-year-old. Or there is a villain villain and his gang that comes inside their house, and they're running away through back door, or they're getting lost in the Kumbh Ka Mela, and the twin brothers are split. So most of the retro movies that I remember started with a hook like this.
Certainly, if near the beginning thieves come into the house or violent people come in, that is an injustice which has to be repaired. yeah, in the course of the movie. There has to be maybe not revenge, but there has to be justice. The wrongdoers have to be brought to justice, and if a young person was really emotionally traumatized by it, that has to somehow, there has to be some healing or some kind of recovery. So the hook or the inciting incident sets the story in motion in the sense of things are thrown off balance, and the story cannot end until the balance is reachieved. This relates to the theory of story by Vladimir Propp, who was a Russian scholar, especially of fairy tales. But his theory, his vision of story applies to stories in general. His vision was that every story has three parts. At the beginning, the family is together, everyone is together, it's peaceful, it's love, everything's fine. But then something happens. Either there's a villain or it's an act of nature, but somehow the happy home is shattered, and the inhabitants of the happy home are scattered to the four corners of the earth. And it's a terrible time for everyone involved. Eventually, one young member of the family is able to bring things back together, perhaps by fighting the villain or just by somehow reformulating the family. It's not going to be the same the way it was, because some people may have passed away. So it's not going to be the same formulation, but it's going to be a reformulation. And so the story cannot end until that reformulation has occurred. So that vision is starting with peacefulness and togetherness, then a breakup and a shattering, and then a reformation. Don't go creating a story on this model, please. But keep it in mind, and maybe you can tweak an existing story with some of these models. Okay, so the first thing is the hook and the inciting incident, and then well-made play. They talk about rising action, where the main characters, they're on their way now. They're on their path to solve the problem, or to get justice, or to heal. So they're on their way, but problems come up. And those in the cinema world, at least in Hollywood, those are called pinches. There's a pinch. The pinch is some problem that comes up, some obstacle, which the main character has to overcome. It's going to involve a setback, involve some difficulty, but as things go on, the main character maybe gathers her resources, gathers some allies, and there's a certain point of no return, where at a certain point she's really committed to going forward with this and solving the problem. Joseph Campbell speaks of the call to adventure, and many characters don't want to go. It's too difficult, it's too painful, it's too scary. But eventually they might go, and there's a certain crossing a threshold where it's a point of no return. They're dedicated to solving the problem. So that's the first plot point. That's the first pinch. Second plot point, second pinch. It gets, it builds up the excitement, the pressure, the danger, the hope, and there's a lot of agreement that about 2/3 of the way through, or 3/4 of the way through, a disaster happens. Everything falls apart. It seems that everything is lost. It's the darkest night, because in my movie, which is one of the three stories that I'll be examining in this workshop, the a herd of elephants, a herd of a herd of elephants come on stampede because they're running away from a fire lit by some bad people. They come running through the village and stomp on the small laptop computer that is used to as an important part of the movie. The movie is some USA teenagers come for an educational visit to South India and visit with tribal people in the forest. And in the course of it, they learn about a very powerful flower medicine from the tribal people, from a senior tribal lady. And they want to tell the world about this. And it's all set up for a big video conference where they're going to patch into global news. But before that can happen, that afternoon, this herd of elephants comes through the village and knocks down the laptop computer and stomps on it. So it seems all is lost because the computer is crushed. Fortunately, one of the young characters, a young lady character who's a techie, had backed it up on something else. So all is not lost, but for a moment it seems all is lost. So that's just one example. But there is agreement in the script guru world that there needs to be a moment where just the floor falls out from underneath the character and us, the viewers, who are hopefully we're rooting for the character, right, to achieve the plot goal. But the floor falls out, and it seems there's no hope, and so there's just absolute anguish. But fortunately, it turns out there's a recovery. And as that recovery happens, it leads to the final event, the final confrontation, the final struggle, the final victory for the character and or the characters. And that is where they show what they're made of. You see, that is where they rise to the occasion. They do what they've never done before. They do what they never could have dreamed of being able to do. But circumstances were such as they were, and they were able to rise to the occasion, despite it all. So, so that's the that's the three-act structure. Any questions? Any comments about the three-act structure? Ken, I think you have something to say about this.
Yes, thank you, Eric. I just wanted to comment that when we talk about literary techniques used in writing literature and writing plays and writing screenplays for the public, there's a curious disconnect that can happen if you use techniques normally used by film with an audience that is used to traditional folk tales. As an example, I decided to use a film technique in an old Nordic folk tale called the let's see, the Cat of the Dovrefell. Mm-hmm. And what I did was I jumped to a pivotal moment in the story where trolls are about to break down a door, coming into a cottage up in the mountains, and a hunter and his pet polar bear are going to defend a family. And so it's a very exciting moment. And I started off with that. There was the quiet before the door bursts open and the appearance of the trolls and, the type of thing that in a film would grab your attention and really make you want to go, wow, what led up to this? And then everything else, you look at the backstory after that moment, mm-hmm. and bring them back up to where that door scene is. And then you keep going, right? So you start with action, you make them wonder why, you explain where they've been, how they got there, and then you proceed before that. I did that to an audience that had been listening to traditional folk tales. And two older women came up to me afterward, and they were very polite, and they said, "We really enjoyed your story, but we were kind of confused at the beginning. We weren't quite sure why that was happening then." And what I realized was that was a movie technique, and people who go to films expect to be grabbed in the first couple of moments. That's fairly common today. When you're telling to an audience that's used to folk tales and traditional oral narrative, very often there's a little more time before something of great impact happens. You're establishing the when and the where and the who first, then you give them the hook. So just a word of caution that you have to consider your audience and what they are expecting.
Yes, yes. But I coach a lot of storytellers, and I use the word storytelling as I was trained by Laura Sims to refer to using the body and the voice. I don't consider movie making storytelling or writing a novel storytelling. Storytelling is a live social event where people can give feedback to each other instantaneously. And I had many discussions with Laura about whether we can talk about storytelling by video conference. And I think the jury is still out on that. We may have to call it video mediated facsimile of storytelling. But in storytelling, I feel also that the listener has to get a sense early on of why why I should pay attention to this. I don't think it's so great to be telling a story and 5 minutes in nobody really knows what the point, any sense of why we're listening. So as I say, Vladimir Propp, who worked with fairy tales and especially told story tales, he believed in this model of peacefulness and then breakup, and then the need for reformulation. But yes, let's take what you're saying into consideration. And I know there's a lot of truth to it, but I'm seeking in this workshop to look at story regardless of the medium it's presented in. And so I submit that when we're presenting a story, it's good to give you the consumer or the audience member a sense from the get-go of what's going on here. Why are we here? But okay, let me. Sarah, did you want to say something?
Yes, thanks, Eric. I kind of like your feedback on what I ought to do as I'm developing historical stories. Specifically, I'm thinking I'm going to do some stories for events like the Methodist women's group that I did a story for last night, like a 7-minute story. It's called Star Spangled Love, and it was about civic love in early America, right? And I could kind of do a structure where I had a hook and I had to edit and edit and edit to get it down to the 7 minutes. But now I'm realizing the importance of selecting details for that kind of story. But then the other situation is when I'm at a living history event and I'm dressed, say, in 18th century clothing, okay, and I'm realizing that people's attention span is not very good for those events. Like if I have a station that I'm working at, I'm doing an 18th century coffee house, for example, I have to figure out how to do like a 2 or 3 minute story, which actually seems easier in a way because there's so many like little vignettes, you know what I mean? But how to structure it so that it's really interesting, gets their attention, but it's not so long that they don't walk away, to some other part of the living history event. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Not sure. Ken, do you have any reply to that, to what she's talking about? Let's think about it. Go
Sarah,
ahead.
you have a specific kind of audience when you're crafting your historic stories, and you know that you want to impress them with a point by the end of your story, and you probably have a pretty good idea of what they already know. And I guess it's your challenge to decide how quickly you introduce the element of change or of crisis. Your story is going to be more interesting if there is a problem. It shouldn't just be a chronology. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. So you have to use your gut sense of what's going to be more effective for that particular piece of information that it amounts to an historic story, and entice your audience to want to know more.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you,
Thanks,
Sarah.
Ken.
As I say, the overwhelming thinking in the field is that a story involves a problem which the main characters are trying to solve. A journey that the main characters are on to try to get something, do something, make something. The characters want something. I've been told by students, yeah, I have a character who's just standing on the beach looking at the ocean, and this character doesn't want anything. So I said, okay, that's great, but it's a kind of a short story. But I'm open to possibilities. I'm not rigid about this. Let's see a story where there's no problem to be solved. Let's see a story where there's not a character who wants something. But that's the common approach. Let me just show you two visual charts of the two models that I've mentioned so far. So you know I'm not making all this up. Screen share. Okay, here is The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. I guess it's starting here and going counterclockwise. Initiation, adventure. Actually, it could go either way. I think it's coming counterclockwise. Crossing a threshold, there's fear. The main character might be reluctant, but the main character is being called. She has a calling, either by nature or by the divine, because in this model, the main character is not only revitalizing herself and finding herself, she's going to revitalize the entire community, the entire land. Because in this model, at the beginning, unlike Prop's model, in this model at the beginning, the land is barren. Nothing's growing. And it's because of the tyranny of the senior rulers of the society. They're just crushing everybody and everything. So most people just go along with it because they're weak. But the future heroine and hero can't stand it. But they're not in a position to do anything about it at this time, but they head for the hills. They go to the forest, to the mountains, or they jump into the ocean and swim with the knowledge, the faith that Mother Nature is going to protect them. And she does. And they go on their journey, they get their magic sword or whatever symbolic object they're going to get, which represents divine power, but also the central energy source of their own soul. They find it, they get it. They may have to fight for it. And then, now the force is with them, in the language of the Star Wars. Now they cannot be stopped, because the whole universe is with them. And they come back and they overthrow the tyrant and institute heaven on earth. And of course, it's a cyclical story, because even that the main character eventually will become a tyrant and grow old and rigid and will need to be overthrown again. So this is the hero's journey. Again, if you read The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, you will know immediately he's talking about a psychological development of oneself, of himself, yourself, He's not talking about some ancient hero who fought a lion or a dragon. Those are just symbols of the inner psychological journey that he feels a character, and by extension, all of us need to go through. One criticism of Joseph Campbell's model is that it seems to be especially a man-oriented model. And one answer to that has been the fairy tale heroine's journey model, which has especially been developed by a lady named Theodora Goss. If anyone's interested, send me an email. I'll send you a link to her essay, The Fairy Tale Heroine's Journey. And that model is that the heroine either leaves her home or she's thrown out of the home. And she goes into the forest. But the forest takes care of her. And she ends up finding the home of an old woman who welcomes her into the house, and she works for that old woman. And that old woman has special powers. She can see the future, she can see the past. When feathers come out of her bed, it snows in the world. It's a goddess type character. But the young fairy tale heroine works for her and develops a craft, either of tending the geese or sewing or some craft, some household craft, and becomes very expert in it. And eventually, a young man shows up who qualifies to be her husband. But at least in one story I'm thinking of, the old woman, before she wishes her protege well, the old woman says she doesn't need to go live with you in your palace. She's earned her own palace. And the old woman claps her hands and disappears, and the hut in the clearing, in the meadow, in the forest, that hut turns into a palace. And that is the palace that is now owned by the young woman. So so you'll notice this model doesn't involve fighting of any sort. It just involves the development of the young lady. So that's the fairy tale heroine's model. Okay, let me show you this 3-act structure graphic, just so you know I'm not making it up. And trust me, there are people going on about the 5-act structure and the 7-act structure. And then one person says, it's all nonsense. It's just because they have a lot of commercials on TV and they had to, do something interesting before each commercial. So if it's a 7-act structure, it's because they had 7 commercials. So that may be the truth. But anyway, at the beginning, the hook and the inciting incident. Then the first plot point is the character takes an active role at some point. At some point, the character stops reacting and takes on the challenge and becomes a proactive figure in the story. But then the pinch points come where they have setbacks, where they're crushed, where they're deserted, but they keep going, and finally they triumph. Okay, stop. Well, anybody comments, questions? See, there are 16 people in this meeting, but only 5 of us have our cameras on, which is okay. Any of you with your cameras off, do you want to say anything? Lalita, go ahead.
Eric, you're talking about Hook, and I'm also a movie buff. So usually these thrillers, right? The murder thrillers, the hook is always, somebody, an ordinary person finds a dead body in a dump yard, or, when they're going for a picnic, they discover a dead body. So that could be the hook for the movie. And then the investigation process, the different steps, and that could be the pinch. So I just wanted to share that.
But I challenge you. I know you tell a lot of folk tales, grandmother stories, as they're called in India. Let's see if you can find an inciting incident or a hook at the beginning of telling one of these, which hooks the listener, so she needs to know what's going to happen next.
Okay.
You know, because she's invested, she's emotionally invested now. I mean, the audience member, she's invested because she's identifying with the character, and she needs to know what's going to happen. I want to know what's going to happen because I care. You know, whenever we perceive anything in this world, we identify with it, and we put ourselves in the position of that thing, and we want to know what's going to happen to that thing. Ken, go ahead.
Sure. I wanted to make a comment about the story you mentioned a few minutes ago about Amanda standing on the beach,
Mhm.
looking out and being peaceful. What kind of a story is that? Well, I think we have to recognize that that's a setting. That is a man on a beach at a certain time, perhaps in his life,
Mhm.
and nothing has happened yet. But there is one approach to building a story where you have once there was, and every day this thing happened. Every day it happened again and again and again until it did not.
That's where the
Until
story
we went to
comes.
the beach. And
Okay.
so the repetitive use of something ordinary and stable and peaceful is setting the stage for a big bump.
Maybe.
So perhaps someone runs up to the man and says, I've seen you standing here every day looking out over the ocean. Why do you come here every day? And he turns and he looks at the person and he says, well, I would not be here if I hadn't accidentally found a rowboat out in the middle of the ocean. I would be dead, and I come here to be grateful. Perhaps you'd like to hear the story about how I got there. You know, so in fairy tales too, you have a normalcy established. Every day, certain things happen. People knew their roles until something came along that changed that. It could be a dragon. It could be a marauding army. It could be some anomaly in the normal life. So there is a place for establishing something that is steady and calm, because it means that there's going to be a bigger explosion when that problem arises.
Yeah, I agree. Usually in life, it's that way, and usually in stories that way, but we have to remain open to the possibility that nothing's going to happen. He may just stand still looking at the ocean until he gently passes away. There's a Russian novelist I read 50 years ago. I think the novel's name is Oblomov, about a character who just doesn't want to get out of bed. He'd prefer not to get out of bed. And that's what he does for the whole novel. I forget if anything ever gets him out of bed, but and that's figuratively speaking. When I say he doesn't want to do anything. He happens to have enough money as an aristocrat, and I guess he gets his food in bed, and that's his story, and he's sticking to it. But
Right. Well, that's a metaphor, isn't it? For a person's life where they are complacent. They're in a
yeah, and
rut.
it's a metaphor for
In a
what
way,
led
they
to the
haven't
Russian
gotten out of
Revolution.
bed.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
So everything is steady and normal. You're in bed all this time until there's an eruption, and then you're no longer allowed to stay in bed.
Maybe.
One quick comment. There are many cultures and many languages and many different forms of syntax. Is it not? It isn't a surprise to think that human beings are capable of processing story when things are in a different order, as
Mhm.
they are when you look at the syntax of different languages. Different
Yes.
languages express themselves differently, yet you can learn to think in that language and dream in that language. So it's possible. So I think as a creature capable of story, there are many different ways.
Yes, and one reason it's good for a young person to hear stories and read stories is that we develop knowledge of different patterns, and we come to be able to recognize pattern recognition. If something happens, we have a feeling something else might happen. So we learn these patterns, and then when we hear or see or read a new story, we're waiting for it to follow the pattern that we have in mind. But it's the option of the creator of the story to tease, to not give the expected development, to play with the expectations. There's the expression, people are waiting for the other shoe to drop, because one thing has happened, one foot has fallen, and everyone knows the other shoe is going to fall, but you can hold off, you can change it. That's called suspense. When people are expecting something to happen because they know the pattern, they've seen this movie before, figuratively speaking. They know the pattern in art and life, and they're ready for it to see it again. But you don't have to satisfy that interest in that pattern. You can have things go sideways. Yeah, I like these expressions. I've seen this movie before. This is where I came in. People use these expressions metaphorically to refer to real life situations, right? If they don't like what's going on in a social situation, they say, I've seen this movie before and I don't care for it. I saw it coming. Or then there's the expression, this is where I came in. Right? If something's happening again and again, people say, this is where I came in. I've seen it now. I've had enough. But yes, I wanted to mention about dramatic tension, suspense. That's when there has been foreshadowing. Foreshadowing means something happens, an image, a sound, an incident, and we all know what has to happen next as a result of that what has been introduced. But it may take a long time for it to come, and it may come in a different way than we expect. But it's planting a seed. It's building up anticipation and expectation. That's part of what happens near the beginning of a story. So you have to be aware when you're telling any story. Your audience members have heard a lot of fairy tales. They know what is supposed to happen. So you can play with it. You can give it to them or not give it to them, or give them something different from what they expected. Okay, we're coming to the end of this.
Minute.
To the end
Since
of
you
this
just
segment.
asked,
Yes, go ahead. Lalitha, go ahead.
yeah, no, since you just asked me about folk tale and how I can create a hook folk tale. Traditionally, folk tales, you can't have so many hooks and all that, but just one story which came to my mind. I think most of you are aware of the monkey and the crocodile story. The friendship between the monkey and the crocodile, the monkey which lives in the banks of the river. So traditionally, the story begins as once upon a time, there lived a monkey who lived near the bank of the river. It had tasty fruits. There was a crocodile, and the monkey gave fruits to the crocodile. And the crocodile's wife wanted the tasty fruits, but she actually wanted to eat the heart of the monkey.
Yes.
So the crocodile treats the monkey and says, my wife is going to give you a feast, so I will take you to my house. But midway in the river, the crocodile confesses to the monkey saying that, I'm sorry, my wife wants to eat your heart and I'm not taking you for a feast. So the monkey that time very cleverly thinks of, oh really? Don't you know, we monkeys keep our heart at the branch of our tree. So probably we can begin the story this way and then move on to the story. So you said you have to catch the audience attention.
What you can do, go ahead.
I could start the story by saying the monkey was riding on the crocodile's back in the river. And the crocodile said that my wife wants to eat your heart. And the monkey said, don't you know, we monkeys keep our hearts in the branches of the river and branches of a tree. So that just struck me. And then
the way I like to tell it is the monkey is on the crocodile's back, and the monkey says, oh, by the way, what are we having for dinner? And the crocodile says, you. And that is the way that the crocodile confesses to the monkey the crocodile's bad intentions and give the monkey a chance to escape. Because I find that story so upsetting.
Eric, it's specifically the heart. Because
yes,
that's
yes. I know. Or no, sometimes they say the brain. The monkey left his brain in the tree. But the point is that I find that story so upsetting that a friend would plot to destroy another friend. I tell it in such a way that it's clear that the crocodile, consciously or unconsciously, gives the monkey a chance to escape by confessing the intentions before it's too late. But what you can do with that story is, okay, the monkey and the crocodile were friends, and the monkey was giving mangoes or whatever it is to the crocodile. But the monkey knew that the crocodile is a what is the word, carnivore. So the monkey from the beginning was a little unsure of the situation. But the crocodile seemed so friendly, he decided to trust the crocodile. But you see, you can plant that seed of doubt in the monkey's mind, in the audience's mind at the beginning, and that seed of doubt grows into a big reality when the crocodile says, "We're having you for dinner." So I'm sure of it. You can establish the need for something. Well, look at Jack and the Beanstalk. You know, he's at the beginning, he's a useless fellow. He's foolish. He sells his cow for some beans. And we all know that he's a dreamer, he's foolish, he's naive, but he's also sweet and kind and sincere. Somehow that can be communicated at the beginning, that he's sweet, kind, and sincere, and that things might work out for him because of his sweetness, kindness, and sincerity. You can communicate that in a way. And then the audience will be wondering, how is he going to recover from losing the cow? And then we find out. Okay, we're getting close to the end of this session. We had a talk about a dramatic structure. We talked about the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. I insisted it's a psychological model, and in general that all this talk about dramatic structure is all about the path of psychological development of characters, and more about this tomorrow night, to rise to the occasion and transform, grow, become something they've never thought they could, and go through a transformation that is thrilling and inspiring and hope-giving to us observers. So we talked about the three-act structure in this context. We talked about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. We talked about Vladimir Prop's three-part vision of togetherness, breakup, togetherness again. We talked about the fairy tale heroine's journey, where the young woman goes into the forest. See, a key point is that she's not destroyed in the forest. Somehow Mother Nature is looking after her. Just like in the Joseph Campbell model, the characters who jump into the ocean are not destroyed by nature. They are protected by nature, because nature, the universe, the divine, whatever you want to call it, needs that character, is working through that character to bring joy and goodness and beauty to the world. But it can only happen because the character is humble. Let's give honorable mention to Aristotle's theory of catharsis, that we love to hear a story about someone becoming big, important, powerful, because we admire people like that. But then we also get a big kick out of it when they get destroyed because of their own pride. Because we like them being destroyed because we're jealous of them. So that is one theory of story, especially tragedy, I guess, or stories about powerful figures that we like to see. We like to put them on a pedestal. We like to see them get big. We identify with that part of it, but then we're also happy when they get crushed. That's Aristotle's theory of one type of story. Okay, final words for tonight. Anybody? Moira.
Yes, this is something that maybe all of you know already. This series with Bill Moyers, The Hero's Journey with Joseph Campbell, these interviews he took on George Lucas's farm. And this is it's wonderfully done. And you can learn such a lot. What you just said, Eric, about storytelling and power of the myth and everything. So I just found it on YouTube, all the parts of it. So this
It-
is something I can
it-
really recommend. I don't know how many times I've watched it already.
Yeah, it goes on and off YouTube. For years it's there, for
Ah.
years it disappears. So if
Okay.
it's there now, I recommend everyone get it. And if you
Before
can
it's gone again,
if
yeah.
you can figure out how to download it, you might download it. But yes, he gives a summary of his vision, which is expressed most fully in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. But what's so touching about that interview is that Joseph Campbell was about 80 years old, but still very spry and totally together. But he passed away before it was aired on television. He passed away a few months after the recordings were made, and he never really became a famous figure. He became much more famous after he passed away, especially because of that series. So so there it is. Okay, so tomorrow, more about character. And then the first 4 sessions will be complete, and the last 4 sessions are applying this to your stories a week from today, and then to the Tempest. I'm going to go through the Tempest because I've loved it for so many years, and looking at structure, character, all of it in relation to the Tempest, and also the next night. A week from tomorrow, looking at the Epic of the Anklet, the Tamil story, which drew me here to Tamil Nadu 40 years ago.
Eric,
Yes.
how long will the recordings be up? I have to miss the next 2 weekends, so I'd like
The
to watch them.
recordings will be on as long as I live.
Okay.
Eric, you promised to send a link to the essay about the heroine's journey.
Yes. Well, do you all have my email, right?
Right.
Yeah, please just send me an email and I'll send it, because I'm not sure that I can okay, I'll find it right now. Just a second. But
While you're doing that, I'd like to comment. Joseph Campbell was able to come up with his hero's journey after he studied East and West cultures extensively. You know, that so we are benefiting from his comparative study of religions and literature and those cultures. It's not as if he dreamt up the hero's journey as an individual theorist. He's giving us the benefit of the comparisons.
Of course, and he came after 100 years of writings by literary theorists and anthropologists, James Fraser, The
Right.
Golden Bough, all
Right.
sorts of scholars have been reducing myth and fairy tale to formulas for 150 years. So Joseph Campbell was is worked on those people's shoulders.
Absolutely.
Okay, okay, there it is. Into the Dark Forest, The Fairy Tale Heroine's Journey by Theodora Goss.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to stop the recording.